What happens to our minds when we say cognitive distortions whilst navigating depression and anxiety diagnosis? When we talk about cognitive distortions, we're referring to specific, irrational, and often harmful patterns of thought that can significantly influence how we feel and behave, especially in the context of depression and anxiety. These distorted thinking patterns can create or intensify emotional pain and keep you stuck in a cycle of negative thinking, further impacting your mental and physical well-being. 1. Negative thought cycles. Cognitive distortions often create a feedback loop in the mind, where negative thoughts lead to negative feelings, which in turn lead to more negative thoughts. For example, if you think, "I am a failure," this thought can bring about feelings of hopelessness, which then reinforce the belief that you are indeed a failure. The more this cycle repeats, the stronger it becomes, making it harder to break free from it. 2. Distorted perceptions of reality. People with depression and anxiety may begin to perceive the world around them through a distorted lens. What may be a small setback or a neutral event might be magnified and interpreted as evidence of failure, worthlessness, or impending doom. This can lead to heightened emotional states such as extreme sadness or intense worry, emotions that don't necessarily match the actual situation. 3. Impaired decision-making and problem-solving. Cognitive distortions can interfere with your ability to think clearly and make effective decisions. When you are stuck in distorted thinking, it's harder to see things from a balanced or realistic perspective. This can make decision-making feel overwhelming or impossible, further deepening feelings of helplessness or confusion. 4. Avoidance and escalation of anxiety. Many cognitive distortions can lead to avoidance behaviors, which might bring temporary relief but can make anxiety worse in the long run. For example, if you engage in catastrophizing, expecting the worst outcome, or fortune-telling, predicting a negative future without evidence, you might avoid situations because you believe they'll lead to disaster. Over time, this avoidance reinforces the belief that the world is dangerous or that you're not capable of handling things, which escalates anxiety. Common cognitive distortions in depression and anxiety. 1. All or nothing thinking. Black and white thinking. This distortion involves seeing situations in extreme terms, with no middle ground. For example, depression: if I don't get everything perfect, I'm a total failure. Anxiety: if I make one mistake, everything will fall apart. In reality, things are often more complex and less extreme, but this thinking pattern doesn't allow for nuance or shades of gray. 2. Overgeneralization happens when you take one negative event or experience and apply it broadly, assuming it will always happen. For example, depression: I failed at one thing, so I'll fail at everything. Anxiety: I had an embarrassing moment at work, so I'm always going to embarrass myself. This thought pattern exaggerates the meaning of one event and can lead to feelings of hopelessness and heightened anxiety. 3. Mental filtering or disqualifying the positive. This distortion involves focusing exclusively on the negative aspects of a situation while ignoring any positive ones. For example, depression: I did well at work today, but I made one mistake, so the entire day was a failure. Anxiety: I've done a good job in the past, but this time it might go horribly wrong. This pattern keeps you focused on perceived flaws and failures, preventing you from appreciating successes or positive aspects. 4. Catastrophizing. Involves imagining the worst-case scenario and expecting it to happen. This is common in both anxiety and depression. For example, depression: everything I try ends in failure, and nothing will ever get better. Anxiety: if I make one mistake, I'll lose my job, and my life will be ruined. This leads to excessive worry and a constant sense of impending doom, amplifying both anxiety and depression. 5. Personalization. Involves blaming yourself for events that are outside of your control or that are only partially your responsibility. For example, depression: my friend is upset, it's because I'm a terrible person. Anxiety: if something goes wrong at work, it's entirely my fault, even if other factors were involved. This thinking pattern leads to feelings of guilt and shame, even in situations where you are not responsible. 7. Should statements are rigid rules about how things should be, often leading to frustration and feelings of inadequacy when these standards aren't met. For example, depression: I should always be happy, I shouldn't feel sad. Anxiety: I should never make mistakes, I must always be perfect. These kinds of expectations are impossible to meet and often lead to guilt, shame, and increased pressure, which worsens both depression and anxiety.
How cognitive distortions affect your mind. Heightened emotional reactivity. When you engage in cognitive distortions, your mind exaggerates emotions, making them more intense. For example, catastrophizing about a work project might cause extreme anxiety about something that, in reality, may not be that big of a deal. Similarly, overgeneralizing a negative experience can reinforce feelings of hopelessness in depression. Decreased self-esteem, cognitive distortions like personalization or should statements can lead to harsh self-criticism. This impacts your self-esteem, making you feel like you are constantly falling short of your own expectations or the expectations of others. Over time, this can deepen feelings of depression and anxiety, making it harder to see your inherent worth or positive qualities. Impaired coping skills. When your thinking is distorted, it's harder to cope effectively with challenges. For example, mental filtering can make it difficult to see the good in your life, leaving you feeling stuck in negativity. Similarly, fortune-telling can cause you to avoid situations or opportunities out of fear, which limits your growth and reinforces the cycle of anxiety and avoidance. Breaking the cycle of cognitive distortions. Recognizing and challenging cognitive distortions is one of the most powerful tools in managing depression and anxiety. Cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT) is especially effective in helping people identify, evaluate, and reframe these distortions. Here are some strategies to manage cognitive distortions. 1. Awareness. Start by noticing when you're engaging in distorted thinking. Keeping a journal of your thoughts can help you track patterns. 2. Challenge. Ask yourself whether your thoughts are based on facts or assumptions. What evidence do you have to support these thoughts? Are you ignoring positive aspects of the situation? 3. Reframe. Try to find a more balanced perspective. For example, instead of thinking, "I always mess things up," you might reframe it as, "I make mistakes sometimes, but I can learn from them and do better next time." Practice self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Healing takes time, and it's okay to feel imperfect. Shift from self-criticism to self-compassion. By recognizing and addressing cognitive distortions, you can begin to reduce their impact on your emotional state, leading to more balanced thinking and improved mental health.